Who's gonna actually before you start? Who's reading the
Wait,
announcement?
we started.
All right.
I was going to read the announcement. Welcome everybody to our monthly Heptio Ark office hours. Actually, we renamed this the Heptio Ark Q&A. I should update the slide there. Let's go through some quick introductions and then we will get started. Let's go Andy, Steve, Nolan, Wayne, Megan.
All right. I'm Andy Goldstein. I'm the project lead for Heptio Ark, and glad to have everybody watching.
Hey everyone, I'm Steve Chris. I'm a system software engineer at Heptio. I've been working on Ark for pretty much since it was released, and glad to be here and answer some questions.
I'll go next. I'm Calisa Pinto. I'm an engineer working at Ark, and I'm the newest member. Bring your questions.
Sorry about that, having Zoom trouble. My name is Nolan Brubaker, and I'm an engineer on the Ark team.
Hi, my name is Megan Bruce, and I'm a product marketing manager at Heptio. Pretty new, so just joining to learn more about Ark.
And I'm Wayne Witzel, systems engineer, also working on Ark.
Tim, I think you're last. If you want to go.
Well, I'm Tim Carr. I'm on the field engineering team here at Heptio, and I'm just here to be a fly on the wall for these office hours today.
Awesome. Tim, if you have any questions, just feel free to either type them into Slack or let us know. So the way this is going to work is I'm watching the chat on YouTube as well as our Slack channel, which is #ark-dr. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in there. Something that we also do is we kind of basically pay attention to the Slack channel throughout the month in between office hours. And then we do kind of wean out questions that we think are reusable and useful for the community and then kind of reiterate them here in a more high bandwidth setting. So the way this works is we do this once a month. So if you, at any point, if you're using Ark and you feel like you're getting stuck or anything like that, you can always join this call. You can actually join the Zoom directly if you want. We'll just invite you. And we can walk through your problems or just answer your questions. So we have some announcements, some shout outs, and then we'll get into questions. Has anyone joined since we started here that needs to introduce themselves? Okay, do we have anyone lined up to read the announcements, or do we just want to go through each one of these as they
Well, George, since I think you were instrumental in getting the Focal bot integrated, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, so we added a bot to the channel called Focal. That's F-O-Q-A-L. And what this bot does is it tries to figure out, and we're using this in some of the upstream Kubernetes channels as well, is if you ask a question, it kind of uses machine learning to figure out, hey, a person asked a question, and I think I know what the answer is based on the first person that responded to it. And then what you could do as a member of the channel is choose to save that question in Focal. And then what it will do is if people ask the same repeat questions over and over again, it starts to get smart enough to, if someone asks a question, it will like intercept them and it will send them a whisper that has the answer. So we use this in the Kubernetes channel a lot for like, hey, what are the dates for KubeCon, right? That's like a question people always ask, and it's, you know. So in a lot of the help channels, we've actually started to file in a lot of Focal questions, and the more questions that it has, obviously, the smarter it gets. So we enabled it for the Ark channel. Carlicia did. And how many questions are we added in there? Do we know? Are we keeping track? I mean, I know we can go in there and look up. Yeah, go ahead.
So the person who did this bot, his name is Vlad Slorberg, and a super helpful person. And he actually added the ability to filter by workspace. So now I can answer that question. Before I couldn't because it was really hard to separate. But I also wanted to add a couple more things about the usefulness of these bots.
Sure.
It doesn't send you as a user, as a user of the channel, a private message. It's a whisper, which is very unintrusive. It's like a little tiny box on the bottom of the chat. And if an answer pops up, you can say, he asks you, was this answer helpful or not? And please, help us by marking either or. And yeah, so it's super unintrusive, and hopefully will, as time goes on, you'll be more and more helpful.
Awesome. And as Obala, I think you type /focal help and it will tell you what it needs to do.
And one more thing on that, it is a bot, but there's also there's some other Slack integration that it uses. So you don't have to type /focal and then your question. You can just ask it in the channel, which some people were confused by. But yeah, if you don't know focal, even know focal exists, it should be able to catch your question.
Okay, moving on, because we got our first question in the YouTube chat. Thank you, Moody Sada. We'll get to your question here in a minute. Quick shout out to cubedex.com, which mentioned Ark is one of your top 10 cool things to install in your cluster. So thanks for the shout out there. And there's a new repo. Carlicia, did you make this repo? Who wants to talk about this Ark community repo real quick?
Yeah, it's really a joint effort. It was me who pushed in this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's done very much in the format of the TGKI repo, and so we have a place to put the notes for the Q&A sessions, which is one of these ones that we're doing right now, and the Arc Design sessions, which are awesome. And we're going to have one of each month. So every 2 weeks we're going to be having one of the two. And it has an index with all of the sessions, and you can browse. And once you get to a page corresponding to one of the online meetings, you will get all the content for that session. So you get the announcement and links. Everything is going to be typed up in there. And also the link to the video, which is the most important one. And also, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Very relevant. The issue list in that repo is not the only place, but it's a great place for people to add requests, questions, if you want for us to do a walkthrough of a particular design aspect of Arc, or Q&A questions, so you can just easily add an issue there.
Yeah, and I went ahead and posted the link to the notes in the Slack channel. And what we'll do is at the end of this, we'll just commit the whole thing to GitHub under this repo, and we'll just have one repo with all the notes. So if you ever miss a show or anything like that, you could just go in there, grab the playlist from the YouTube channel. I've created a playlist for all of these. So if you want, you can go in there. If you're getting on a plane, you can just snag all the videos, snag all the notes, and then have all the information you need. All right, we have a new release last Thursday. Who wants to talk about this one?
Yeah, I can cover this.
Sure.
We released version 0.9.7 last Thursday. It was a collection of bug fixes. I think we had 6 different bug fixes, and you can check out the release on GitHub and see the changelog for the details of those. Would like to call out that 4 out of those 6 bug fixes were actually contributed by non-Heptio employees, by community members. So we're really excited to help from folks who are using Arc and see bugs and can contribute fixes. So we hope to keep having those inputs.
Awesome, great. And then lastly, Andy and Carlicia wave frantically. We'll be attending KubeCon in Seattle, so reach out to us if you want to meet them. We'll have a booth there if you just want to arrange to come talk to us, or you have any questions. Feel free to ping us in the channel. We'd be more than happy to talk to you. All right, some quick shout outs before we get to the questions here. Thanks to the following GitHub users for contributing bug fixes into the 0.9.7 release. I'm going to butcher this one, but Mwiezorek, MWIECZ Zorek, Mark TC, Subheksha, and Tim Reinman. Did I butcher those totally?
Just the last one is Timo.
Oh, Timo Riemann. Okay, I get that. And note to myself: try to find the real names instead of trying to vocalize their GitHub handles. All right, we ready for some questions? We've already got one from Moody Seda. Oh, and Ross would like to say that he's also going to be at KubeCon, so if you're interested in talking to that. So I'm going to ask Moody's question, and then I have a related question to it that we got before. So Moody asks, Helm chart for Arc doesn't have a way to expose Prometheus metrics. Is there an alternative way to trigger alerts on backup failures? This is kind of related to a question that we had over the month is, how can I get Prometheus metrics for Arc, period? So consider that like a two-part question.
So the Helm chart for Arc is community maintained. We've reviewed the initial pull request to add it to the charts repository, but we are quite appreciative that community members have put in a lot of time and effort to create it and maintain it. So I would recommend that if it doesn't support an easy way to set up the metrics or set up Prometheus, that you could open up an issue in the Helm charts repository and specify for Arc that that's what you're looking for, and we can try and provide some guidance there. It should also be possible to add annotations for the Arc deployment and the pod specification after Helm has put it in there. I'm not super sure on if that would be maintained across Helm version upgrades as you pull in newer versions of Arc, but probably the best thing to do is open up an issue in the charts repo.
Okay. And the related bit about annotations on the Arc pod to allow Prometheus to find it. I'm looking in the notes. It says there's several open issues to provide more/better dashboards. So what do we have now?
We have some basic metrics around backups and restores and failures, or the various statuses that you get when we execute a backup or restore. Nolan, I know you put in a couple besides just those basic statuses. Did we have something else as well? I think we have the backup size, maybe.
Yeah, we have the backup size. We, as part of that work, we added backup start and end times, so you can calculate durations. And I think that's the bulk of what's in there right now.
Yeah, and if there are additional metrics that you're interested in seeing, please let us know. There's one open issue, I think it's number 84, but we'll double check and get the right link in place for metrics in general. At some point, I would like to close that one out and open up new issues for individual metric suggestions as they come in, but that would probably be the best place right now to go take a look.
Mm-hmm. So it's possible for me then when I set up, the Helm chart, let's not think about the Helm chart for a minute. Assuming I already have Prometheus and Grafana and everything already set up.
Yes, it is possible.
Most of the metrics. Okay, so then the do out there is need to loop around on the Helm chart to see exactly what it sets up, if at all. It looks like it doesn't. This is not the first time someone's asked about the Helm chart. If there's anybody out there who's willing to help us out with the Helm chart, I know that we can give advice on what we'd like to see, and maybe you can I'm thinking of a person who's using the Helm chart right now, and I've not asked him how exactly he set it up, but I know he's using Prometheus. So maybe that's a place where we can help find people that are trying to set it up the same way and see if we can get that goodness in one place. So thanks very much, Moody, for your question. Feel free to ask a follow-up if you have any. Looking forward to seeing if there's any other Prometheus metrics you would like us to add. Okay, any other comments on Prometheus or Arc or anything before we move on? Okay, all right. Question from this past month. When will the next Arc release be? And I know we have like a new cadence thing going on, so just question for the group who wants to talk about this one.
Steve, you want to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've decided to snap to a 2-week cadence for bug fix releases. And so the way that we envision this working is that we have a kind of a standing every other week release scheduled, and that's on Thursday afternoons. So we did one last Thursday, so the next one is scheduled for next week on Thursday. We'll basically monitor over those 2 weeks whether there are any new bug fixes coming in and whether they are relatively easy to backport into the previous version. We've set up a new label in GitHub, which you can see in the notes, is called backport candidate. And so as things come in and we're thinking about possibly backporting them, we'll use that label to identify them. And then, you know, a day or two before we get to that release, we'll make a call as to whether we actually have enough fixes to cut a release. But if there are things that are backportable, then you should expect a release. So look for the next bug fix release next week. We are also working hard on version 0.10. We've been working on that for a couple of months now, and I think we're getting close to wrapping it up, but we still have a few weeks of work to go. So we don't have a specific date for that, but I think, you know, towards the end of October, beginning of November is when that one should be expected.
And we probably will be doing multiple betas. So I wouldn't recommend necessarily trying master right now, but when we do have the betas out, we would really appreciate if anybody has the time to give them a try.
Sure, and then I have some follow-up questions here. So when 0.10 comes out, what's the status then of the 0.9 branch? Is it like Kubernetes? Will continue to get bug fixes, or at some point are we hoping to cut people over?
We generally have not had multiple branches alive at the same time. So when we hit 0.10, assuming we do what we've done before, we won't have any new 0.9 releases. Having said that, though, there's a lot of changes in between the 0.9 series and 0.10. So maybe, depending on community interest and needs, like if there's something critical that's wrong in 0.9 and they can't switch to 0.10, like we could consider doing some additional bug fix releases.
And have we had a beta period like this before?
We've done betas before for a week or two on like 0.8 and 0.9, I believe. So we're ultimately working towards a stable 1.0 GA release, and we have a large list of features and bug fixes that we're evaluating to decide if they're going to make the cut for 1.0 or if it's going to be a 1.x or a 2.0. And so the way that we decide that is if it's something that looks like it's going to be a breaking change, then it either has to wait until 2.0 or it has to get into 1.0, or we pull the community and see what the acceptance is for a breakage in the 1.0 line. But we're really trying to figure out what are the must-have features and bug fixes for 1.0, and then what can come in 1.1 or 1.2 versus breaking changes for like not a redesign, but something significant enough to call it 2.0.
Right. And then 0.10, thinking around 0.10 November-ish, 1.0 this year, I don't know if you can commit to anything.
We had a desire to get 1.0 out this year. I am skeptical that we'll get there, but we'll see.
All right. Any other questions on releases? Please feel free to toss them into the Slack channel. All right. Any comments on releases before I move on from our illustrious panel? Wayne is strangely quiet today. That's weird. All right, next question. What's the procedure for using Azure? And then I get this link to an Azure config file here. Who wants to take this, Azure?
I can field this. I think we've had a few questions in the past month about setting up with Azure and running Ark, particularly with AKS, their managed Kubernetes offering. The link there is our documentation on how we suggest you run Ark within Azure. Probably the biggest caveat is Azure has a concept of resource groups that it places things in, and with AKS, there is a new resource group generated for you that you have to point Ark at. And I think that's one of the most common issues we see with people trying to run on Azure.
Yeah, and I did recently get a PR merge to just make some tweaks to the Azure documentation to hopefully make the resource group nuances clearer. So I think at this point, it should, if you follow those instructions, it should be pretty clear as to what you need to do. But as always, if you run into issues setting up or running it, reach out to us on Slack or through GitHub.
Yeah, and those of you that are clicking through on the notes, this is the first time I've noticed the version docs for Heptio Ark. Have we told people about this?
We've had version docs for a while now.
About a year.
Was it this pretty before though? I don't remember this blueness.
That was from one of our designers, Ross Fenrick.
Oh, okay.
We're still working through some of the tooling and automation around making it much easier for the team to publish up-to-date documentation for master, latest version, previous versions as things change. But yeah, we do have documentation for multiple versions.
This is really cool. I feel really silly not knowing about this, but it looks really nice. All right, anything else about Azure before we move on? All right, next question. I got a timeout error when restoring a persistent volume. How do I fix this? I remember this one over the past month. Andy, I think this is either you or Steve.
I'm happy to talk about it. So we had some code that waited up to 30 seconds, and it was a hard-coded 30 seconds to see that the persistent volume that Ark created from a snapshot was ready in whatever terminology the storage provider uses. And for larger snapshots or on slow days, it would take sometimes more than 30 seconds to have a ready volume. And we just removed the this 30-second wait because Kubernetes will repeatedly attempt to attach the volume to the node, even if the status is not ready. So it'll just keep trying until it is ready, and then things proceed. So this was just an artificial wait that we had in there that it's hard to get right for all the use cases. So we just removed it, and we're deferring to Kubernetes on figuring that status out.
And how does this work? Does Ark just keep asking Kubernetes over and over again then? Or
it's not an Ark thing. So Ark will create a disk and then set up a Kubernetes persistent volume to point at that disk. And then when Ark creates a pod, or a deployment and replica set create a pod that's referring to this PV ultimately, the scheduler will stick the pod on a node, and the kubelet will, the controller manager will repeatedly try to attach it until it's ready.
Okay. All right, any other comments on this, PVs? Moving on, will Ark support Kubernetes volume snapshots?
Steve?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about this. So in the latest Kubernetes release 1.12, an alpha feature for supporting volume snapshots was released as part of Kubernetes. It's an out-of-tree feature. It's an alpha, so it's still experimental and liable to change. We've been sort of tracking it and keeping an eye on it to see if it's something that we would ultimately want to integrate with Ark. And I would say at this point, we're still not sure, given that it's definitely an alpha feature. We do want to take some time to experiment with it and kind of see what the pros and cons of it are relative to our approach over the next few weeks, and also kind of see how it moves along towards stability. So I think, overall the message here is that we need to wait and see, but we're definitely aware of it, definitely going to experiment with it, and then see what makes sense.
And I'll add that even if you do use the Kubernetes volume snapshotting feature, I think by itself, it's just a data snapshotting feature. And so Ark still does provide benefits of backing up your Kubernetes resources. So just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, and then just kind of a general question. When things land so in Kubernetes, things go alpha, beta, and then production or GA. Do we as an Ark generally keep track of alpha features coming in, and then like when they turn beta, you kind of take a more like how do you triage all the incoming alpha features? Like
So most of the features in Kubernetes largely don't impact Ark itself. Volume snapshots definitely is in the same domain, given that Ark does volume snapshotting. So that's definitely one that we, as Steve said, have our eyes on, and we will play around with it when we have some time. But for other alpha and beta APIs, they're largely just things that we are able to back up and restore. And sometimes they may require some special handling. Maybe we need to order how we change the order in which we do a restore. So we do service accounts before pods, for example, and maybe there's some new thing that we need to get in as well. But yeah, other than that, it tends to be fairly consistent regardless of what the specific API is.
Okay, thanks for that. I was just wondering that myself. Let's see. We just answered that one. 1 second. All right. Another question about the Helm chart. Is the Ark Helm chart maintained by the Ark team? So we addressed this a little bit, where it's community written, but we've reviewed it, right? It doesn't do bad things.
Yeah, we have reviewed it.
So I think probably the question the person is asking, and I think this is related to the question before, is who do I talk to as far as getting a feature request in? So I would say file an issue on it, let us know about it. You know, and we're happy to help advise people if they're looking to implement it. It sounds like a good place where someone can help us contribute. I don't know how many cycles we have as far as keeping the Helm chart up to date. So we will, best effort, I guess. All right, can my users manage Ark for their own namespaces?
You want me to take this one, Steve, or anybody else want to do this one?
I can take a stab at this.
Yeah,
So there's been interest in having Ark on a cluster and having a little bit of self-service. So you've got a namespace for a given team, and people want to be able to make their own backups without having that group able to back up and restore anyone else's stuff. Right now, Ark is not really configured for that. You can use Kubernetes service accounts to limit what an Ark installation can manage. But right now, that would likely need an Ark deployment per namespace, and we haven't really tested that. We definitely have issues to investigate allowing this, but our current recommended operating method is to have Ark run as cluster admin so that it can grab everything. And that means that only trusted cluster administrators should be doing the backups and restores.
I'm fairly confident that we can run multiple Arks in a cluster, having them scoped to each namespace. I don't think there'll be any issues there. Where there will be an issue is with persistent volumes and anything else that's cluster scoped. So depending on what privileges are granted to the service account that Ark is running as, if, for example, the service account can do anything it wants in namespace X, so it's basically full admin on that namespace, you still have to potentially give it access to cluster roles, cluster role bindings, persistent volumes, and there's no way to really segment which ones you have access or the service account has access to. So we are kind of in the back of our minds trying to figure out if there's some way to have a singular Ark installation like we do now, but still have sufficient security so that non-administrative users can come in and request backups and restores without having a privilege escalation. Because what would happen now is if a regular user were allowed to create a backup, then it would that user would essentially have cluster admin through the Ark servers account, through Ark's ability to take a backup of everything or do a restore of whatever was backed up into any namespace, both cluster scoped and namespace scoped resources.
It sounds like that'd be really useful for teams, right? Like a development team, and I just got a bunch of namespace. I don't even know. Like I don't know. I can just imagine myself going, "What's everyone doing? You know what? I better back all this up just in case, right?" I let George go and create stuff. I better give him a method.
Yeah, and we've also heard people want this in like a multi-tiered way. So we have you have a cluster administrator who can back up everything,
right?
And they'll do like regular backups of the cluster, but maybe this team wants to create a new namespace that they're working on and move it over without bugging the cluster admin and be a little bit more self-service.
Yeah, exactly. So that sounds awesome. With that, more questions, if you have them, please. We are monitoring #ARK-DR on the Kubernetes Slack as well as YouTube. If you're just joining us, please feel free to ask any questions. Other than that, we've run through all the questions this month, so we're just waiting for live questions here. And while that's happening, we can maybe talk about the next design topic for the next session, if you all want, which is, hold on. It's hard for me to get a calendar open with so many open things for the stream here. Give me a moment, which would be October 23rd. So do we were talking a little bit about this before the stream started. Do we have any design topics that we want to discuss? Or are we still pretty much head down in point 10 and volume snapshots? Because we can just punt that and then just go straight to the next Q&A, which would be on 6th November, would just be our next Q&A.
Yeah, so I think, given where we are in 0.10, I think we've pretty much nailed down all of the design questions for this release.
Sure.
And I think we are going to be pretty heads down on just coding and trying to close out 0.10. So
right.
I think from the core dev team, we don't have anything that we need to talk about. That said, if there's a topic that's interesting to someone in the community, we'd love to hear about it.
Okay, so I'll do this. I'll just basically say, hey, everyone's heads down unless anybody wants a specific session for anything, and we'll kind of keep it penciled in. We'll for sure do this next Q&A on 6th November. And then depending on when I don't know where the next, I don't want to look too far out. I think that might land around. As we get into November and December, the design sessions, because they're later in the month, that might start to run into people's holidays. So we're just call it when we see it, I guess. So yeah, what we'll do is at the end of every one of these sessions, we'll just make sure that we talk about what's next, and then I will schedule it immediately after that. Other than that, it looks like we don't have any more questions, so I'm ready to wrap it up. As usual, users, if you're listening in and you feel like you missed this and stuff like that, feel free to just ask your question in Slack. Even if we do answer it in Slack, we like to go over them in the video so that we're ensuring that we're getting the information out there and sticking them in notes and sticking those on GitHub so that they're useful for you. So if you have any feedback on the format or anything, we're always happy to hear. Any other comments or anything from the team? All right, great then. We'll see everyone November 6th. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.